Recording started.
Hey everybody, I want to welcome you to this little chat we're having here from Tactical Sovereignty. This is typically the link for the Sunday night Matrexit discussion group call, but every now and then we do conversations in between, and we're doing one this evening with Micah Dank, who's been with us here a couple times. He's an author. He's putting out some excellent information for people. He's got a I believe it's a 6-book series.
7.
Yeah. So, and he's constantly decoding more and more information, whether it's Nagamati or different things of interest like that are religion based or world religion based, I'll say. But we just had a few things that he wanted to go over this evening. And so, how are you doing, Micah?
I'm well. How are you? I like the background.
Excellent. Thank you.
It's my first book.
Yeah, I noticed I had it in my files. Yeah.
Yeah, for people who are watching, it's my first book. Let's just jump right into it. So, have you ever seen the YouTube video of that man who was foraging for food and they brought him to court because of it and he got them to throw it out?
I'm very likely I've seen it. I'm sure. I don't really
He kept
remember any
calling himself the
details.
living man.
Oh, yes, I'm very familiar with him. Yeah.
So,
And
if you could explain what he basically did there.
right. I think what he did there, he doesn't even really fully comprehend what he did there. He thinks he does. But I remember seeing that several years ago. And I've listened to some of the YouTubes that he does explaining different things. And I see his point of view, how he looks at things. And he does look at things biblically based. And he does what a lot of people, and this is, I think I was kind of going to name this tonight, down rabbit holes, and this is one of them. But this is one of the things that a lot of people stumble into, and some of them keep studying and figure it out, but some people just stay with this idea and don't move past it, unfortunately. And that is this idea of going into court saying that they're a living man, living, breathing, they bleed, all that stuff, right? And that comes from an idea of people thinking that they see you as being dead, all right? And
that goes into
I think
the fictitious entity, the capital letters on the social security card, that whole nonsense. Right.
And that comes, I would maybe even earlier, but I know this is something that Bill Faust taught, all right? And that all capital name is a corporation, and people see that word corporation and they go and take the root word of that, which is corp, okay? And somehow or another they decide to throw an SE at the end of it and say corpse, all right? Well, corp just means body. A corpse means a dead body, right? But it's not a corpse-oration, it's a corporation. And a corporation is nothing but a body of people that have come together with a similar goal and a similar purpose. And they're working together to fulfill that purpose, where that purpose is for the corporation of General Motors, which is making vehicles, or Nike tennis shoes, which that corporation, their goal is to make shoes and sportswear and to turn a profit. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, you could take that word corp, and I mean, you could throw any suffix on the end of it that you want, but that doesn't mean that it belongs there. And the SE does not belong there. It just means body. Corp means body. So, I think what he did there when he was going to court, because people look at it that way, and they want to go in there saying, I'm the living, breathing man or whatever, or I'm the live woman, and they don't, I'm sorry, but the courts don't see you as dead. They don't arrest dead people. They don't put dead people in cells. They don't, when you go in jail, you wake up in the morning, they don't give dead people a bologna sandwich or a cold egg sandwich.
That's interesting that you say that, because I remember Santos Bonocci, who I teach for now, by the way. We're very friendly. He went to court, and he got in court in Australia, and he presented a certificate of live birth, and it basically did nothing.
Right. And what the situation is, and to me, I mean, I was having lunch with Kurt Kallenbach. We were talking about it here a few years ago, and trying to kind of decipher what's really going on with the whole thing. And actually, it was like the next day I was thinking about it, and it like dawned on me. It's like, wait a minute. Okay, you've got the judge in the room there. The judge is acting in a representative capacity for the county and for the state. You've got the clerk of courts. They're acting as a representative capacity for the county and the state as well. You've got the prosecutor. He's operating in a representative capacity. You see where I'm going here?
Yeah.
Everybody's acting in a representative capacity. So what in the world would make you think you're not acting in a representative capacity as well? Which is what the case is.
Well,
I mean,
there's an interesting point to be made because there's another video that was circling the internet, not just the living man one, but the other one that I saw was a man who the judge kept trying to get him to confess his name. And he would just say, "Oh, my name is John." "No, that's fine. Johnny," sometimes. He wouldn't say his full name. And he ended up getting the judge to bow to him. And then the judge left, and then he basically dismissed the case with prejudice and walked out. And the whole thing was filmed. So there has to be something there. If you're not providing in court, if you're not providing your fictitious name, they can't switch roles with you. Or that's what it seems to come from. That's what it seems to come from both Santos and Franco Collins, to be honest with you.
right. Well, what they're looking for instance, and I think I know what video you're referring to, but what they're looking for from you is they need full consent from you, that you are going to be there in the capacity they expect you to be in. And if they don't have that from you, they might be in a little bit of a bind. And every judge is going to handle it differently. I think the one that you are referring to was the one when so-called Kata Gaia was at court, actually known as Keith Thompson is his name. And the judge was asking him, either you are Keith or you are his representative.
Yeah,
you are his
Keith,
agent.
yeah.
Right. And the judge did not dismiss that case. What happened is the judge left, went back into chambers, took a recess, even said, "We're taking a recess," went back into chambers. At that time, Keith or Kedagaya said, the judge has abandoned the court. I'm the only sovereign here. I declare this case dismissed or discharged, whatever he said, and he walked out.
Right.
That was only the first half of the video. They didn't show the whole video because it does continue, where the judge comes back out and guess who's abandoned the court? Keith Thompson abandoned the court. All right. And so the judge ruled against him in absentia. In his absence, he ruled against him.
Really?
And he received a fine. Yes.
Well, why did he
And it
bow to him
continued
then?
on. I watched it, and it's like, I wouldn't say he bowed. I don't know if the judge turned and looked down at something or whatever, but it didn't look like a bow to me. And to me, that's kind of like seeing, rabbits and puppy dogs in the clouds,
It's, I mean, between the two of those videos, it seemed like Santos makes a case that the court case is ecclesiastical. What do you think about that?
All right. Now we have to look at things. It's just like reading scripture. Okay. Things that are written down in history or whatever, we have to look at things not through our lens, but through the lens of those people. Now, with Santos is where's he from? Australia?
From Australia, yeah. He lives in Mexico.
Yeah. So he's coming from a standpoint of a system that is underneath the British Crown, right? So we have to look at things in the perspective of the British Crown. Now, I haven't studied their form of the judiciary very closely, but I know that when the founders came to this landmass, which, by the way, it was named British North America, by the way, at that time, when they came here to British North America and they were eventually setting up their judicial system, they wanted to step away from what was going on in England, what they had been used to, which would have been partially that ecclesiastical court side, because there's two systems going on. There was the statutory law of the king, and then you had the ecclesiastical court also of the church. And one of the frustrations that people had at that time was that if somebody didn't like a court ruling that they got, say, in the statutory court, then they would run over to the church's court and try and get a different ruling there. And so now you've got two opposing rulings kind of butting heads, and it caused problems. So when they came over here to British North America, and this is easily found in their writings, is that they merged the law of equity and the statutory laws together. And that way it would kind of avoid that situation. There would only be one form.
Okay. So let's switch it up a little bit. How about this? Let's see. What should I ask you first?
Let me add something to that also, because there's also talk of people that will say, for instance, that the judge will leave and go back into chambers. Okay.
Right.
And I kind of call that the Holy of Holies,
Right.
and they're up above you. I mean, you can look around the courtroom. You can see the altar of sacrifice, where the defendant's at. You can see the altar of showbread. You can see the altar of incense. I think just about every courtroom, there's kind of a little railing that runs along the front, in front of where the judge sits. There's your altar of incense. And then you've got your jury box or your choir box, as you would have in the ecclesiastical setting. All of those elements are present. So that courthouse downtown really is a temple of the county. That's the temple church for every county. So you see some things that people will want to tie back into maybe being a temple setting or ecclesiastical setting, such as the judge getting up and going back into the most holies, going back into chambers, and then coming back out again to finish a ruling. Right. And I've actually had a situation like that one time, and nobody blinked an eye when it occurred. It wasn't a surprise to any of the parties involved in the court. And what the situation was that it wasn't. It was more of a family court, if you want to call it that. It wasn't necessarily a criminal court. So it wasn't really a prosecutor and a defense, but there was somebody on the state side, and then there was somebody else on the civil side. And what had happened was that there was some information that had come across from the state side that they had furnished to the civil side. The problem was that they had furnished that information to the civil side the night before the court date. And in statute, in their rulings, which is a good thing, it is dictated that you're supposed to have, I believe it was either 3 or 5 days after receiving the information before you're required to act on it. And that is what the civil side was trying to press the judge to do. And the judge even turned to the state and looked at the state representative and said, "Have you ever seen me follow that rule? I've never followed that rule. Why should I start following it now?" But the attorney on the civil side was like, "No, I'm sorry. This is what the rules are, statutory was, and I need the time to be able to look at this new information before it should be able to be brought forward. That's what this statute clearly says, and that is what I'm requiring to have happen." And after the judge or that, court administrator kept arguing about it, she got up and she went back into chambers, and she was gone for almost 10 minutes. Nobody said a word. Everybody just continued on like everything's normal. And some people would say that what she did is she switched the roles of the court when she did that. That when she went back in the chambers, she switched from being a state judge or something like that to now coming back more on an ecclesiastical side of the court to make a ruling.
When you call recess, you go from supposedly, you go from regular law to maritime law, I think, is the second one, and then the third one is ecclesiastical religious law. That's right. I think I got that right, but maybe.
Right. And I've heard that claim, but I don't think the judge has to physically do anything, to make a ruling, whether it be a ruling in canon law or maritime law or ecclesiastical or
Right.
statutory. I don't think they have to do anything physical regarding that. They can just choose to do that on a whim.
You know,
Um,
Jordan Maxwell also is on the limb of saying that lawyers, people in court, they don't actually when you go to school for it, you don't actually learn law, you learn procedure, which is a whole different ball game. What do you think about that?
no, that's absolutely true. In fact, I listen to a lot of things and read a lot of things from law professors, and very often that they state right there that the things that are taught in school is basically concepts of law and procedures of law, things
Right.
like that. You know,
Everyone has
it's
different things. I had a friend that went to Hofstra Law School. Sometimes Hofstra Law does torts first. Sometimes Harvard does contracts first. Everybody has their own way that they do this.
right, right. And now, my opinion in the situation I was in is that because there was a conflict on what this judge wanted to rule, according to what she had normally done in the past, she wanted to make sure she could do what she wanted. Because, see, judges have to also make sure that the rulings that they make stick. They don't want somebody to come back and show that the court made a mistake. And that's
You
a
mean
black
when
mark
it's
on them.
appealed and overturned?
Right. Those are things judges don't want to see happen. So they try to make sure things are as tight as possible. So I believe firmly in the situation that I was witnessing that what had happened was that this judicial administrator, the judge, went back into chambers and she decided to phone a friend. And she called a mentor or another judge and said, "Hey, I have never followed this before. That could this come back to bite me in the butt?" And they probably told her, "Yes, if it's statutory, you might want to follow it. Does it really make any difference whether you follow it or not? Just go ahead and follow it." And so she came back out and she sat down and she said, "Well, upon review, I've decided yes, I'm going to go ahead and allow you the extra time to look at this new information, and um, uh, we'll reschedule this court date for a time in the future." And that's what they did.
Right.
Um,
Um,
but
Remember how last time we spoke about how I think you mentioned that when you go sovereign, you still recommend insurance, like
right,
car insurance, for example.
right,
Well, I found out, I have an intel, I found out that I'm in New York, that the New York City police do not have insurance because it would cost them something like 32 to 40 million dollars a year to insure all the cars with everything because
yeah,
they're high risk and all this stuff. What they do instead is they have about 70 lawyers at about $200,000 a piece on retainer. That way, if you ever get into an accident with the cop, you'll end up they'll sue you basically, or you have to go through the lawyers. So I'm wondering, is this the kind of practice that is done throughout everywhere, or is it just isolated to New York City? Because again, we're talking about cops not having insurance. Honestly, if you're drunk and you're about to hit a cop, it's better that you hit a pedestrian than a cop because they have
right.
lawyers on, So I'm just wondering what your thoughts on that are.
No, and when I say I recommend insurance, it's a little broader than that, actually. I recommend that basically you have something covering your butt, put it like that. And now, in the case with the officers in New York, if that's the plan that they've decided to follow, then there might be other ones. I'm sure that they didn't come up with that concept on their own. I'm sure, you know, they got that idea from maybe the Chicago mobsters, or something like that. But I think they all have different things that they use, and that because you have to have something that's propping up the value of what you could have damage on your side. Now, every state that I've looked at, for instance, you don't have to carry insurance. If you don't want to carry insurance, some people who are more wealthy, you own lots of property or things of real substantial value, will also carry a surety bond. which is all that insurance really is. It's a form of a surety bond. In fact, you can get surety bonds at a lot of those same insurance companies. You can get surety bonds as well as like at title companies. I've purchased them there before. And a surety bond, if you have something of value that can back up what the requirements are, say, for instance, in the state, a state may require $10,000 for uninsured motorist coverage or something. You know what I mean? If you've got something of value worth 10,000 that you can use as surety for that, then yeah, you're welcome to do
I
that.
think liability only is something like 50 or 100 grand.
Right. Yeah. But so you've got to have something in the background basically to back you. Now, the nice thing about those surety bonds is that a surety bond is a much lower payment. You're looking at a much smaller percentage. I think I had a $10,000 surety bond at one time, and that was running me $100 a year. So yeah, instead of paying $200, $300, $400 a month on your insurance, yeah, you could make maybe a $200 or $300 payment per year if you're running a surety bond instead of running the regular commercial insurance. The situation with the surety bond is that how many middlemen are there between what you own and you? There's just a surety company that wrote the bond. That's it. So with insurance, you've got you're getting insurance company through a store that's a franchise of another company that also belongs to another company. You got a lot of hands in the pot that you've got to feed. So regular commercial insurance is going to run a whole lot more than a surety bond will. And I'm sure that's what a lot of the bigger fleets use is surety bonds to cover their insurance. Otherwise, even on the commercial side, look at your regular bread driver for some company. All those bread trucks they have on the road, that insurance would be really expensive and cut into their profit. So I could see them running things like surety bonds instead as well.
So speaking about things, we were talking about Jordan Maxwell before. How do I put this? He makes the claim that your birth certificate, the number at the bottom, the gold number or the red number at the bottom of it, is actually it's a stock on the stock market, and or it's a bond or it's something along that lines. And if you check it, you can see what you're worth. Now, is there a way to access that money?
Well, it's like a bank account. If you didn't deposit money into that account, then no, you can't access that account. Only the people that deposit money into it can. And and this is an area that a lot of people are starting to look at right now. Those people that created that would actually be what's considered the principal, because you are, like I was saying, you're in a representative capacity. You are in the agent position, they're in the principal position. And so technically the principal should be the one that's paying the expenses for the agent, if that were the case. Now, as far as that red number at the bottom, I've spent a lot of time on the phone with Vital Statistics, and a lot of these people in these departments, they're bored as heck. And they'll sit on the phone with you for 40 minutes, just chit-chatting, and you can get some interesting info from them. And I actually did bring up to one lady that red number that's at the bottom, because I had ordered a certified copy of the birth certificate prior, and sure enough, it's got that red number at the bottom. And I asked her about that, and she said, well, that's actually a tracking number. She says, so I said, anytime you mean that there's an inquiry made regarding this document, that number will like tick up one? And she said, yeah. And I asked her, I said, well, then there's got to be somebody that holds the file of everybody that's done inquiries into this account. And she said, yeah, but I'm really not sure who that would even be. And I'm sure that's the case. She probably had no clue whatsoever.
It's above her pay grade, right?
Yeah, but to test that theory out from what she had said as well, I went and ordered 3 copies that day. And when I got them back in the mail, sure enough, that red number was all in sequence, for the 3 that I ordered. One ended with a 2, the next one ended with a 3, and the next one ended with a 4. So what she was saying looked very plausible. No, as far as
Gotcha.
looking up value or whatever, I remember a number of years ago when I first started seeing some of this info. My girlfriend at the time and I got on the computer, and we didn't use the registration number on the certificate of live birth or that red number on it. We used what it used to be printed on the Social Security card. It used to say your account number. We used that account number, which was the Social Security number, and I think it was the Social Security number without dashes. That's what we put in. And you did that through Fidelity at that time. Now they've kind of changed some things, and I guess there's still a way of doing it, but I put in the Social Security number that I hold to see what came up with that. And if I remember correctly, it was like 15 to $20 million, something like that. Okay. Now, you have to remember, and this is going to go somewhere. I have parents who both went to college. They've both held good jobs. They've owned homes, started businesses, things like that. That makes sense. That means the potential of my future value could be very good. So, of course, there's going to be a higher price number there, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Now, we went and we put in the number for my girlfriend at the time. She, unfortunately, had never known her real dad, who she knew as a dad, had been with her mother for a very long time. He was not even hardly a functioning illiterate. He could not read.
Mm-hmm.
He could make things out the best he needed to, but as far as being able to sit down and read even a semi-collegiate level, there's no chance of that. Now, her mother, she had gone to college, but she had never utilized her degree in finance. She had always worked at 7-Eleven or something like that. And so when we looked up my girlfriend's number, her value came up to something meager like $5 or $6 million, way lower than what mine had. So that kind of made sense. Now,
So is it kind of like the number that they come up with? Is that like a lifetime earning potential number that they just assume that you may hit based on your productivity in the world? Because
right.
that's what it is. You're talking about humans being born in the system as collateral debt for the future. That's why
Right.
that's what keeps the things moving, which is why
Yeah.
it's such a scary thing that with the elites and everything that they're doing from the food to Roundup to everything that they're doing, the fluoride in the water, the pharmaceuticals with the hydrocarbons that end up in your heart, to everything that they end up doing is for population control. And we are now at a point where we're below replacement rate. So our value in the world should, based on that, wouldn't you say, be going down?
Okay. Population control is a viewpoint that a lot of people have come up with that. And I'll touch on that in just a second. I want to finish with that birth certificate issue, though, because like you're saying, yes, they are looking at a lifelong potential value that you have as to what you can put into the system. There's actually a term for it because insurance companies use the same exact thing. Life insurance companies, especially ones that do like whole life policies. I can't remember the exact term they use for it, but it is essentially, what your life's potential is financially.
Mm-hmm.
And now, as far as them, say, for instance, investing on the stock market or whatever with the birth certificate, I look at it like this. If you remember back after the turn of this century, when mortgages were being put on the market and they're being put into bundles, okay? Now, we're talking one individual mortgage as compared to a birth certificate. Now, inside that home of that mortgage is probably what, 3, 4, 5, 6 birth certificates in there. Okay.
Yeah.
But with the mortgages, they didn't sell those individually on the market. That would have even been too cumbersome. They put those into bundles.
Right.
All right. And they would bundle it as a plus or a B minus mortgage bundle, which those were all fraudulent, and those got sold on the market worldwide. And what happened. Look at Greece. I mean, they had to do bail-ins. They had to freaking rob money from people's bank accounts to keep their government afloat, right?
Yep.
Because they had invested in some of these bad mortgage bundles,
I think
and
Italy
that's
got
what
hit too, right?
Italy got. Yeah, a lot of countries did, but that was a result of that bubble burst there in '08, '09. All right, and incidentally, I find this interesting, as this compares right to what we've seen the past couple of years. Is that right after that time they went and did the TARP bail-in? Remember the TARP bailout that was done?
Yeah.
And the TARP bailout, I want to say it was $700-800 million, something like that. I could be wrong. I think it was somewhere in that neighborhood, though. And I know everybody was up in arms about giving. What are we doing, giving all this money to the banks? Of all people, why are we giving money to the banks? And that happened in the fall. Well, come Christmas, boom, that was when that so-called bubble burst, the housing mortgage bubble burst. And here in 2019, in September, about the 12th or 13th of September 2019, I was noticing that the banks had decided they didn't have as much faith in each other anymore, because as people hopefully should know, banks have to come out at a zero balance at the end of every business day. Money out, money in, they have to come to a zero balance. Okay.
Mhm.
And so what they do traditionally, they would always be borrowing money back and forth to each other at the end of these closing days
Mhm.
to keep each other at or near that zero balance. Well, in September of 2019, the banks went to the Federal Reserve and they said, hey, we are losing faith in each other. And we aren't really doing these loans back and forth with each other like we
Well,
used to
Brian,
do.
Pythagoras said 700 billion. I think you said million before.
Okay, so it could be billion, but
Yeah.
either way, it's not going to be a drop in the bucket compared to what I'm
No,
going to
not at
show
all.
you now, because um, so that what they said to the Federal Reserve is, you're going to have to start lending us money, because we can't be borrowing money back and forth from each other. We're charging each other 10 up to 15% interest rate for overnight loans. We can't afford that. So we're going to have to get money from you. Otherwise, our banks are going to fall apart. And so the banks in 2019, September of 2019, started doing what they called the repo loans, which stands for repurchase loan. They were doing repo loans to the banks, the reserve was. And this was only supposed to last until October 15th, all right, of 2019. Guess what? It's still going on today. And I remember in the spring of 2020, I was looking at the numbers of how much money had been let out, and it was in the trillions. Forget that 700 billion number now. It was in the trillions that they had lent out so far.
Do you
Because once you start
attribute
giving money out, you can't stop.
do you attribute the banking and everything and just the national debt and everything that you're just talking about right now? Banks, I think, carry what, 3% of what they're supposedly carry. The rest is just digital. Everything is debt. If you were to get rid of the Federal Reserve, right, and you were to install like a sovereign bank like Andrew Jackson did, right, where we can constitutionally print our own money backed by gold and silver, like the greenbacks or what Executive Order 11110 Kennedy tried to do before he was murdered. Do you think central banks are at the bottom of everything? Everything just funnels up to them, and if we could just cut that hard out, we could restructure our whole system?
Well, the banks kind of do tend to look like the monster in the room, but I would tend to side with what Walter Burien says, who exposed the CAFR accounts. Walter Burien says it's not the banks. This goes back to what you were talking about earlier, Micah. He says it's insurance. It's the insurance companies. That's what really runs everything. Because we see maybe the insurance company on the corner and we think that that's all there is to it, but it's way bigger than that, because there's private insurance people who do nothing but deal in surety for you've got replevin loans, bid bonds, multiple bonds that get underwritten for construction jobs, for court cases, you
Right.
name it. It really comes to insurance. And but if I think though that if the present day Federal Reserve was to be wiped out and something else was to be established, we would probably be looking at maybe an easy 5 years of really, really tough times and things that would make the Great Depression look like child's play because
Wow.
everything right now is built on credit. Like you said, 97% of the money is all digital.
Right.
So much of this is all being run on credit, and there is nothing of substance really holding it up. And so, if you were to yank that carpet off from underneath the world system, and I say the world system because this really is a one world government situation. You take a look at what's happened the past couple of years and tell me that there's not a one world system in place.
Of course
Everybody
there
has
is.
been affected by the same thing.
Would
And
you
that's why I,
agree? Would you agree? I heard somewhere that talking about insurance. Is it true that insurance was started in order to protect against pirates on the sea? Is that where it comes from?
I'm sure it started way earlier than that, even. You know, if you go back to biblical times, look at the dowry that was, given to uh, a couple when they got married. You know, that dowry was there as an insurance plan to protect the girl in case her new husband, you know, got in a farming accident or he died at war, went off to war and died or
Yeah.
something like that,
You'd
or
be
he wasn't
surprised
able to take care of her.
what have you ever seen all the things that Gaddafi used to do in Libya for his
Oh,
people before he was killed?
absolutely. Well, okay. Okay, I guess I would probably add a caveat to that situation about pulling the carpet off from underneath the system. And that caveat would be that the government that is running whatever nation would have to do the same kind of things that Gaddafi did. And we even have states, take the state of Texas, for instance, because of the amount of money they bring in oil, they also will fund schooling for people that are, residents or they're native to Texas or have lived there for X amount of years, and they'll use the natural resources to help their people. And that's really what a governmental system would have to do if the current Federal Reserve System was to go bye-bye, is the state would have to step in and cover that gap and start doing things. I mean, because like Gaddafi would, when people got married, they would receive like $15,000. They had very
Oh
low
my God! If they wanted to start a farm,
if
forget
they wanted
about
to start, right. If they wanted an education, he would pay for their education. And if the education that they wanted wasn't available within the country, he would pay for
it. He
them
would
to
pay
go
for them to
somewhere
go
outside
abroad.
the
Yeah,
country. Exactly. You know, and now those are the kinds of things that need to be done if a leader wants to build a strong country and have a strong economy. That's the kind of stuff you have to do. Currently, we have a government, and I don't use the term our government or our president or anything like that because it's not. It hasn't been for a very long time. If it ever was, it might have been 1781 under the Articles of Confederation. But unfortunately, it's not our government. Because if it really was ours and was trying to do something to build its people and strengthen its nation, we've got a government we're looking at now who has huge investments in Coca-Cola, investments in Disney, investments in all of these huge corporations. Now, who's receiving dividend checks off from that? Well, what money are they even using though to make those investments with? They're using your money to make those investments with, but you're not receiving any of the dividend checks from it. If a country really cared about its people and wanted to build a strong nation and a strong economy, then it would take those different things, just like Walter Burian talks about with the CAFR accounts. You shouldn't be paying maybe just a tax every year on your property. You should also be getting an even bigger dividend check back every year because that tax
right.
money has been invested. There's been investments made with that money. And that's that second set of books, the CAFR accounts, which they changed it from CAFR to ACFR here a few months ago. just to kind of throw people off the trail, I think.
You know, you're talking about Coca-Cola. Did you know that you're talking about investments in Coca-Cola? Coca is cocaine. Cola is the nut on the cocaine plant. Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola used to have cocaine. In fact, Coca-Cola has a subsidiary called the Stepan Company, okay, which is the only company in this entire country that is allowed to import cocaine leaves.
Yep.
Okay, so this is what's going on behind the scenes. And then you don't have to go into the war on drugs and all that. That's kind of like a little lower on the totem pole. But I just find it very interesting that you don't think that getting rid of the Federal Reserve and wiping the debt clean or paying it off or whatever you're talking about, the Rothschilds and all that, you don't see that as the center. There's central banks in every country, but like 5 or 6 of them. You don't see them as the purveyors of all this poverty and insanity that's going on.
At the surface level, yeah, that's what you see. But what's really happening, we never see what's really happening. What really is happening stays hidden. It stays in the shadows, or beneath the veil. As your first book was.
Yep.
So yeah, but there's an underlying system actually, even behind the banks, that's running and controlling things. The banks are basically just kind of like the blister that you see on your skin. You don't see really what caused the blister. You're
Right.
seeing the blister, and that's where your irritation is, and that's where our irritation is. And so that's what we look at. We look at the banks and the central banking system, but it's the people that really created the central banking system and what they are doing behind the scenes. That's the bigger problem.
Right. So I want to switch things up a little bit. I got a question for you. We're talking about sovereignty, right? If you go
Right.
through the steps to declare sovereignty, do you have to give up your right to Social Security? And is it even going to fucking matter? Because Social Security is going to be irrelevant in 30 years anyway.
Well, I've been hearing that Social Security was going to be irrelevant in 10, 20, 30 years. I've been hearing that all
it's
my
kind of
life.
like climate change, right? The way they do
Right.
that.
Let me show you something here. This is a photo that I took here locally.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And I'll just kind of get my beautiful mug out of the screenshot here. People can read that. We never accept a birth certificate as ID. And they even underlined never. That was in the window of every little help counter. Guess what office that was at?
DMV?
That was at the Social Security Administration.
Wow. It makes sense, though. My wife, I'm not going to say her name, but she didn't have a name when she was born. Her birth certificate literally says, when she gets official copies, it literally says female last name. So.
Right. Well, that's one of the things that I point out. In fact, I had a older gentleman from Canada the other day. He got on this topic with me because he knew this stuff. It was just somebody I ran into in regular life, and he started bringing this up. And he actually had a copy on his phone of his birth certificate. And I said to him, I says, isn't it interesting how identical that looks to the title in your car? And he was like, you're right. It is. It's just like it. And I said, there's a big difference between those two documents, though. And he was like, well, what's that? He said, I know one's for a car and one's for, a baby. And I said, well, here's the difference. The car I drive a Ford Crown Victoria. All right. That tells you exactly what the product is. Well, you look at the birth certificate and you tell me exactly what product that birth certificate's referring to, because it may use the term female or male, but those are scientific terms.
Right.
You've got a male and female end of an extension cord.
They used to be. Yeah.
No, female and male's always been the scientific term. And
it's also gendered in other languages too. So
Yeah, in France the spelling's a little different, but it's very similar. But the birth certificates used to say boy or girl, all right,
Mhm.
and they changed it to male and female. Well, male or female what? A male or female end of a plug-in, a male or female duck, a goat, a horse. Horses have birth certificates too, by the way.
Do they really?
Yep, absolutely. So,
Just purebreds, or?
well, yeah, the ones that are the champion horses, the racing horses, things like that. But and so that's one of the things I look at and say, wow, isn't that interesting that these other items also have these certificates? But when you're looking at the birth certificate that they use for the male or the female, nowhere on your birth certificate does it say a male or female what? It doesn't say Homo sapien on it or
Well, because if you
human
look at the word
being.
citizen, citizen's not what you think it is. Person's not what you think it is. Right? So what are they going to call you? In every job that you apply for, are you a citizen? Do you know what the word citizen means?
Citizen is synonymous with subject, and those are both synonymous for slave.
Yep. So let me switch this up a little bit. I got to ask you a question. I promised my astrologer Priscilla that I would ask you a question. She's trying to understand the 1099A. I was wondering if you have like a little bit of information that you could give to us, because she's trying to start her business. And I was just wondering any just general information on how to go about that and what have you.
All right. Well, when it comes to taxes and things dealing with the Treasury, I haven't had a relationship with them in 20 years. So, and that's not particularly a beast that I would desire to poke. The only thing that I have done that I recommend to people, and this doesn't quite cover what she's asking, but they have a form available that will give you a PIN number basically for that social security number. And because I was talking to a girl who she had gone and applied for a PIN number for her children's, for her offspring's social security numbers. Well, because we know that one of the things that are being done when they're going and taking kids and stuff like that, they're going and they're hitting those accounts is one of the viewpoints, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you get that PIN number for the social security number, the only people that have that PIN number is the social security and you. That's it. Nobody else can get it. When she had done that without any court proceedings happening, nothing going on, all of a sudden she got a call out of the blue one day, come pick up your kids. And she was like, wow, what do you think that was? And my only answer would be they couldn't access anything anymore because they didn't have the PIN number. It's fine. You can have somebody's debit card number, but if you don't have their PIN number, it's useless to you. And that's what they've done with Social Security. They've gone and added a PIN number for it, just like you would use on a debit card or on a credit card or something like that.
Jesus Christ. Absolutely bananas.
But, and there's some people too that ask, going maybe the sovereign route or whatever you want to call it. Myself, I just kind of call it correcting the presumption rather than correcting your status, because the presumption is that the state is your God. They are your parents, through the doctrine of parents patriae. That's the way it's looked at. And so my attitude was, you just kind of go and you correct that presumption with them. And no, I'm sorry, you're not my holy father or earthly father or anything you want to see it as. I have one, and it's not you, and you're not who I follow. And you just start opting out of whatever contracts you want to. The nice thing is that what this system has done is that it's compartmentalized everything. And everything is little subsidiaries or agencies, or might not even belong to the system at all, as Ron Paul found out when he wanted to audit the Federal Reserve. They waved their fingers. Oh, no, 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 no. He said, we are not a government agency. We're private. We aren't. We don't have to answer to your FOIA request.
Right. So
And
if you were to go to the route sovereign, if you were to do that, I mean, is there paperwork that needs to be done? Is it just a renouncing of something? Are there specific law firms that specifically handle this kind of stuff?
Yeah, no law firm is going to handle it because they all work for the crown as well. But what you have to do is basically just look at how the principles of how things work and take care of things from that point of view and look at it from the standpoint. I mean, you've been contracting in with them all your life. So you need to make some changes to those contracts or just opt out of them altogether. Um, and, when people see the word sovereign also, a lot of people stand up and say, oh, there's only one sovereign. That's God. That's the creator. Well, however you view that, it really doesn't matter. With sovereignty, there's layers to sovereignty. There is an ultimate sovereign, but there's also people with levels of sovereign underneath that. It's actually referred to as suzerainty. But you'll hear about a mayor being, he has a sovereign government of his town, well, that's a layer of it. But the mayor is still indebted to the county, and has to answer to them, or who has to answer to the state. And the state is basically a franchise of the federal government. So they have to answer to that. How high up are you going to go? You want to keep going all the way up that sovereign chain, you're going to end up at the Pope. And that's
the
one of the things I want to mention.
The Pope is answerable to the Black Pope, the head of the Jesuits. And then there's some that say the Grey Pope, Pepe Orsini, is the one that actually runs everything, but that there's people higher up than him. It's just a never-ending chain going up, and you'll never know the real people who are at the top.
Right.
But it's not the George Soroses or the Bushes or the Clintons at all.
Those are just puppets.
They're just Muppets.
Yeah, not puppets, but Muppets. I like the term Muppet a lot better. But when we look at situations, say, a lot of people bring up the Magna Carta, and they like to use the Magna Carta. And I don't realize why they want to put their standing on the Magna Carta, because the Magna Carta was only good for a few days, if at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was done in.
Well, couldn't you trace it back further? Couldn't you say you could trace back further the idea of the law and all that kind of stuff to the Code of Hammurabi?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. You're going to go all the way back to Egypt with a lot of that stuff. With the first city states that were built by Cain. If you want to look at it that way. But the Magna Carta, when that was signed by King John, what he was doing there is because everybody wants to say, oh, it's under duress, so therefore it's void. Okay, there's strike one. He signed the Magna Carta under duress because the barons were making him sign it because they were tired of all the taxes they were paying out. All right. And then two, there's something that's referred to as a supervening legality. Okay. A supervening legality would be, say, if a man was pushed off a roof, all right, and right after he got pushed, somebody else was standing there and pulled their gun and shot him in the head, and he hit the ground, what would be the ruling on how he died? Did he die from a gunshot, or did he die because he was pushed off the roof? The supervening legality would be that he died from the gunshot. And that was what happened with the Magna Carta, was that earlier, a couple years earlier, King John.
When was the Magna Carta? I want to say 1214. Is that right?
1215.
1215? Okay.
1215. Yep. And that was signed near Runnymede by King John. But the situation was that in 1213, King John had signed something else over to the Pope. He had relinquished England and Great Britain over to the Pope because he was fearful for his seat in heaven or his place in heaven. And the Pope was even saying that the people that lived, the subjects of Great Britain, weren't even allowed to take mass. And so the people were up in arms over it also. And so King John signed over the crown to the Pope, and all rights of the land, resources, you name it, went to the Pope. but in return, to be able to keep wearing that little shiny crown on his head, he rented it back. They rent that back from the Pope, and that's rented back for 1,000 marks a year. At that time, that's what their price was. I'm sure maybe it's changed. I don't know, but it was 1,000 marks a year. And if people want to know what that really comes out to, that's 666 pounds of silver. There's your 666 popping up again.
Yep. You know, I read somewhere that there is only one building on this entire planet that is not obligated to taxes. And I think it's like a Knights Templar building in Scotland. I might be incorrect about that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. In fact, that Knights Templar building in Scotland, is that in Edinburgh? I'm trying to remember the name of it. But they've said also that in that building there's actually a painting of King John in that
Really?
building
That's
as well.
amazing.
Yeah.
Of course there is.
And not only King John, but you're probably going to find King James there along with them too. You know,
would it surprise you to know that that the papal bath, the Papal de Vienna, is papal bath is surrounded by the zodiac?
Yeah. Did I share that picture with you?
Did you?
I might have. Yeah. But yeah, the papal bath. Yeah. It's surrounded by all that same kind of stuff. And there's something that I told somebody I would bring up this evening as well, because we're talking about some of these things that affect the way things run, but though you really don't see it, like the situation with Magna Carta. There's a movement today, and let me see, what's that executive order? It was an executive order under Trump, under the Don. Don, by the way, is a king. It's the head of a family. It's a Don, Donald Trump. But he did Executive Order 13844. And there's people that are, okay, Godspeed to them, good luck, all that kind of stuff. But they're using that to, and I don't want to bring up any of the trigger words, but go after some of the different heads of state, and with different states and different counties, cities, and even the U.S. regarding some of the infringements on liberties that have happened in the last 2 years. And people can go look up that Executive Order 13844. It's like
when
one
you
page.
use the term liberty, Jordan Maxwell says that when he talks about the Statue of Liberty, it's not the Statue of Freedom. Liberty doesn't actually mean freedom. Liberty, when you say somebody's liberty is what sailors get when they come to shore for leave for 3 days. It's a temporary release, and then they have to go back. That's liberty. That's not freedom.
They still have that, rope around their ankle or rope around their neck, or, in fact, you take a look at the Statue of Liberty, and you're going to see the chains on the Statue of Liberty's ankles. If you go and take a look at that,
the Statue of Liberty is ISIS. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, that liberty is not total freedom. And I would say even freedom isn't total freedom. You look at the word freedom. What's dumb? Dumb is dominion.
Right.
There's still an element of dominion there. And that's one of the things that frustrates me too when I hear people talk about rights.
That's why you have something called eminent domain.
Right. Yeah, that's ultimately theirs. But when I hear people talk about rights and teach about rights, when I hear that they're not also talking about duty and responsibility, I know they don't know anything about rights, because if you go and study rights, you're going to find that duty and responsibility are linked to that word rights all the time, because without one, you don't have the other. Bottom line, it's like, think of it like your dog. Your dog isn't going to protect your house if you don't feed him. You don't feed and water your dog, he's going to take off. He's going to go find somebody else that'll take care of him. You know what I mean? Well, your rights are the same way. There's things that you have to do to instill those rights. There's no such thing as, ultimate blanket rights. But when I went and looked at that executive order, one of the first things that it says in there, that it is replacing the financial fraud enforcement task. It's like, God, why would you want to replace the fraud enforcement task? But it also said that it is going to be subject to appropriations. Now, most people don't know what that means. But if something is subject to appropriations, that means it is subject to what money is going to be allotted to it to fund it. If it doesn't get appropriations, then guess what? It's worthless. And you'll read in that executive order as well that, and it clearly says that it does not create any enforcement against the United States or its agencies or its officers or other people, which means it has no enforcement strength behind it. So you can go to them, and this task force is run by the Attorney General. So you can go to the Attorney General with your complaints or your affidavits or your notices or declarations, whatever you want to give him, and it doesn't do any good to him, if number one, he's not been granted any enforcement against any of these people that you're complaining about. In fact, he might not even be funded to do anything. The appropriations might not even be there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I was reading, I'm like, this is kind of a toothless thing that was written. In fact, if anything, it looks like that this executive order was put in place to give more free rein to fraud and corruption within the federal system. If anything, it wasn't put in place to.
Oh, it's long been known that Donald Trump is not a savior. I mean, geez, we don't need to talk about that. My friend Amy did a wonderful video. If anybody's interested, reach out to me on social media. She did a wonderful interview where she traced back Trump's lineage to all this nobility, to all these elite secret societies, to everything. He is not your friend. Do not vote for any of these people. Do not think that Ron DeSantis is going to save the world. Just please, just absolve yourself from it. Don't vote. Just ignore it all. Just stop getting mixed up into the madness. Now, was Trump entertaining? Fuck yeah, he was entertaining. But it comes at a price.
Yeah, he puts on a good show. He plays a good role as an actor, which is what he was. What was he? He was the acting president.
Right.
They're actors. You've got acting judges, acting mayors, acting congressmen. They're all acting.
Do you know who KRS-One is?
Sounds familiar. But I wanted to say no, that Amy you brought up, I'm familiar with her work. I'm trying to remember the name of her channel. But no, it's excellent research that she's done.
Her research she's a good friend of mine. Her excellent research. She's offline because she decided to just get off the grid and spend time with her family. But anybody that wants to see this video, let me know. Please share it with people. Trump is not your savior. Trump is not your friend.
I think she did like Amy Speaks or Amy Says or something like that.
Amy Says WTF.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, she doesn't have social media anymore, but I text her once in a while and let her know what's going on with my books and the potential movie and TV deal. Yeah, so it's I just forgot what we were gonna say. But we're coming up on an hour though. Do you have any questions for me? Because I feel like I've been peppering you with them the whole time.
No. It's just I knew that you had some things that you wanted to cover or whatever, and
Right.
Actually, let me add something though to what I had mentioned too about some of these things. I was talking about, not using the term "our government" or "our president." People need to also realize.
Oh, that was it. KRS-One. He talks about it. He says, "You're the president of a country, but you need security to walk amongst your people. You're not the president."
There you go. Absolutely. What they've done is they've kind of usurped that seat, and that was done in 1789, but with the ratification of the Constitution that had been drafted in 1787.
I mean, it's amazing. I tell people, I talk about it in my first book too, Beneath the Veil. We became a country in 1776, with the Declaration of Independence, supposedly. Washington's the first president, supposedly, but he doesn't start till 1789. So people don't realize he's like the 10th president. People don't realize. Right. It's out there in the open. People don't realize that 1776 we become a country. Who's running it? I think it was Samuel Huntington that was the first. technically president of the country. You can call it the Continental Congress or whatever. Washington doesn't even start till 1789. Why would they omit that? Why would they hide that information?
Right. Well, it's basically because, I mean, they just switched names of the company. They went from the original name of the country, which was the United States of America, and they switched it to United States.
Yeah.
You can see that right in the preamble,
right,
where they state that. But
what do you make
the
of,
original,
yeah, sorry, go on.
the original first justice for the Supreme Court even said the name of this grand company will be the United States of America. And yeah, there was other presidents before. Those were the presidents that were operating under the Articles of Confederation. And in fact, we have another president today that most people don't even realize. And it's essentially the same as what those presidents were under the Articles of Confederation. The other president we have today is the president of the Senate, who would be Nancy Pelosi or whatever that. Yeah.
Did I ask you last time what you make of the gold fringed American flag?
I don't remember if you did or not. And
what do you make of it? Is it a symbol of the corporation? Is it different than just the regular American flag?
Yeah, that's the gold fringe is a military. It symbolizes a military occupation.
Does it symbolize at war?
I wouldn't say at war. I would say martial law. And there's degrees of martial law. There's martial proper is a lower form. And if you go and look at the Lieber Code that was written in 1863 by a gentleman by the name of Lieber, all right, for Abraham Lincoln, you look at that document, and it is, I think, Article 2 of that document says that this martial law will continue. The Lieber Code will stay in force until one of two things happens. Either one, a proclamation of the president, or a special mention in a treaty of peace. Well, there was no proclamation by the president. They got rid of him, and there never was a peace treaty for the Civil War. There might have been a surrender about atomics, but there was never a peace treaty signed, which would mean from the statements within the Lieber Code that yes, it's still in force. And in fact, I've seen an Army field manual from a few years ago that actually made a mention of the Lieber Code in it. So,
right.
And if people want to see how things run, and that's one of the reasons why I say, you can pretty much do and say whatever you want, but they're going to decide what they want to follow. And you can even find that within the Lieber Code. I believe it's Article 6 of the Lieber Code that mentions that the standing army will follow or not follow whatever they want to. It's kind of up to them. And it says it other places also in the Lieber Code. But that's basically what's going to happen. The standing army, they're going to do whatever they want. Why? Because might makes right, right? They've got the guns. So.
All right. Well, Brian, thank you for this riveting conversation. We should do this every month or two.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate it. I'm going to put this up on my YouTube when you send me the link, or you send me the file, and get it on yours too when you can.
Yep. It'll go up on mine in about a week because I've got a strike on me right now. So joy.
Well, just out of curiosity, you don't have to say what it was. Well, 8 months ago, you said?
Yeah, 8 months ago, I did a call with Alvaret, is a friend of mine, and one of the main things that we were discussing on that had to do with parasites, and I'll leave it there.
Okay. Fair enough. All right, Brian. Well, I appreciate it. I will talk to you soon. I hope everyone enjoyed this. It's always fun learning from you. And I'll speak to you soon.
Absolutely, Micah. Great talking to you, and we'll chat again.
Sounds good. Take care.
All right. Bye.